Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're joined this week by Senator Eric Schmitt, candidate for state treasurer and someone who's at the crux of a couple breaking news stories this week. Senator, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with the top. The breaking news coming out this week was that the University of Missouri, after some exhausting hearings that you were on the committee of, decided to cut ties with Planned Parenthood. Give us what's happening right now.
Well, to step back a little bit, the Sanctity of Life Committee was formed after the very disturbing videos came to light of Planned Parenthood leadership talking about, selling body parts as a commodity, and that shocked a lot of people. And the committee was formed to make sure that wasn't happening in Missouri. So our investigative role and just following the facts wherever they lead focused on two fronts. One, is that happening? And what we've discovered is that the department has no idea, because when those abortions take place in the St. Louis facility, they go to a third-party vendor, and there's absolutely no oversight at all. So we've discovered that, and we'll continue probably looking into that to make sure there's nothing illegal happening.
Can you create oversight for that?
Oh, absolutely, we can. The department has said that they just don't know, and so that might be something legislatively we're going to have to deal with. But as a committee, our function is an investigatory function, so we're going to subpoena the third-party vendor to find out what's happening. The second part of that investigation is recently the Columbia Planned Parenthood was licensed by the Department of Health. They were able to be licensed after a lot of recruitment by University of Missouri employees by email.
Were you surprised when you read the emails? It seemed like they wanted to prove a point by having the university taxpayer-subsidized hospital associated with Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, I mean, you literally had university email accounts being used to solicit doctors to open that facility, and that was certainly concerning. But again, our focus is to find out if anything illegal is happening. And what we discovered was, under the Ambulatory Surgical Center statute, you actually have to have a physician have admitting privileges to a hospital nearby a facility like that for obvious reasons, the safety of the mother. And the physician that they recruited, the University of Missouri, didn't give them admitting privileges. They just had what was called refer and follow. So literally you could have someone being dropped off in front of an emergency room if something went wrong, and clearly that's not in the public interest. And so we uncovered that, and I think that led to the university yesterday, or just a few days ago, saying we're no longer going to have this association with the Planned Parenthood in Columbia, because truthfully, the way that it was licensed was illegal in the first place. They didn't follow the statutory framework that's been set up.
How could someone argue that the taxpayer-funded University of Missouri system wasn't publicly helping fund abortions? Well,
they were very involved with the opening of that Planned Parenthood, and I think that the Catholic Conference had expressed some concern. There's just these things that a lot of people didn't know about came to light through this committee's investigation. And as we promised to Missourians across the state, we're going to follow the facts wherever they lead. And they've led to some startling revelations here recently, and I think that led to the University of Missouri's decision to revoke those privileges.
So under the law now, the committee that Senator Schaefer chaired, the committee that you're a member of, if what you brought to light and what the university's now stopped doing continues and stays, will that clinic be able to still provide abortions, or will that actually be the first time that I can remember a clinic stop providing abortions?
Yeah, according to the University of Missouri's release, they're not going to be involved with that facility, and that facility has to have a physician with admitting privileges with a hospital nearby in order to operate. And so that's not going to happen anymore in Columbia. You still have the St. Louis facility, but my understanding is that the Columbia facility now will no longer be performing abortions.
Next topic, you come out with a new initiative, kind of working with former state treasurer Sarah Steelman to talk about ways that under this new, it's not a treaty, it's a pact, I guess you'd say, could actually take Missouri's tax dollars and help fund states like Iran that are state sponsors of terror. Go through your proposal on how that stops.
So with the agreement, and as you mentioned, not a treaty, and I think that was on purpose because it didn't allow Congress to weigh in as Congress would be able to weigh in with the typical treaty. It's an agreement, and it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal for the United States. It's a bad deal for our allies, in particular Israel, because what it does is it keeps Iran's nuclear infrastructure in place. And they have a signing bonus more than that, because they're going to have hundreds of billions of dollars come back into their economy because the economic sanctions are going to be lifted. And those economic sanctions were working. Part of that deal, though, what should be most concerning to Missourians, in paragraph 25, there's actually a provision in this agreement that says the federal government can use all authorities to compel states to change their divestiture policies. What are divestiture policies? Well, Sarah Steelman, who was our state treasurer about a decade ago, was the first treasurer to say, we are not going to invest in companies that do business with terrorist states like Iran. We're not going to have pension money that goes there. We're not going to have Missouri taxpayers go to fund terrorists. Paragraph 25 puts that policy in jeopardy. And so what we intend to do is to put on the ballot, to codify in state law that under no circumstances will we allow Missouri taxpayer dollars to go to fund terrorist states. And it's really important. So that paragraph's put in there for a reason. And it's very concerning to people like me and others. We are the first state to say that we're going to go to the people and let Missourians tell Washington, D.C., this is not what we want to do. We don't want to fund terrorists. 4 other states have signed on, including Ohio. The other co-chairman is the treasurer in Ohio, Josh Mandel. So Josh Mandel and Sarah Steelman are the national co-chairs and providing great leadership. I'm going to be taking that issue on in Missouri. I just think it's really important for Missourians to have the opportunity to weigh in on a very important issue.
So when would that be on the ballot?
Next year.
Great.
In 2016.
So even if the pact, I guess the pact is going to be somewhat law, the kind of quasi thing the president did, the cozying up to Iran, Missouri would be separating from Iran.
Missourians would say, look, you've entered into this agreement, but you cannot tell our state that we are going to invest taxpayer money in companies that are doing business with Iran and fund terrorist activities, because that's exactly what Iran is, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism worldwide. And there's no reason in the world why our tax dollars should go to support that. And so that internal policy that Sarah Steelman put in place 10 years ago, we're going to make sure that's protected in state law, and I'm proud to lead that charge.
Lastly, this may be the only media outlet where you're on where we like to talk about tax cuts. While we're here, I know you've been a champion on the issue. Is there any chance Missourians pay less in income taxes after this next legislative session?
I hope so. I've been a primary author of 2 of the largest tax cuts in the history of our state, and those will be going into effect here in the next year or so. But I think we should do more. I come from a working class background. It meant a lot for my parents to have more take-home pay. And I just think fundamentally that people ought to have more of their own money to spend on whatever it is, whether it's education or an addition to their house or whatever it is, put more money away for their kids' education. It's a fundamental belief that I have. And also, as a disciple of Jack Kemp and wanting to be a happy warrior on this kind of issue, it matters. It matters to real people, and it's not just going from 6% to 5.5% or 5%. These are real dollars. This is more take-home pay for people who are trying to make ends meet so they can be more economically empowered. And that's what's really important. And that's the direction I think our state ought to be moving towards. I'm going to certainly, again, try to lead that fight next year and advocate for average, everyday work in Missouri.
It's really an interesting thing. I mean, I'm just a simple hillbilly from West Butler County. But I just don't see a guy wiping his brow on Friday and looking at his pay stub and thinking, you know what, I didn't send enough money to Jeff City. I can't believe it. And I also think people talk about cuts. I don't think that guy looking at his pay stub is too worried there's one less cubicle filled up some huge warehouse full of bureaucrats. Can you cut government too?
Well, I have a record of doing that, certainly with the tax cuts that I've helped champion, but also with Senate Bill 5. I think what we're going to see now is with the municipal court reform bill that went into law with broad bipartisan support, no longer are these local municipalities going to view taxpayers as ATMs. So they're not going to be able to fund their budgets by setting up a speed trap. It's wrong and it's abuse of power. And so wherever we find that, whether that's in state government or in local government, we need to deal with it.
Lastly, is there a court challenge to the law you passed that stops these ticket traps? Have they moved forward with a court challenge, or where's that at?
No, I would hope not. I mean, they use taxpayer money to fight it in Jefferson City. I hope they wouldn't use taxpayer money to file a lawsuit, and I think it would be unsuccessful. It's nonsense that we can't enact state laws that deal with a problem like this. But again, I've been really heartened by not only the support we had from across the political spectrum, but including law enforcement who said, I did not go to the police academy to write speeding tickets all day long. They're very interested in community policing. I think that our region here in St. Louis and statewide, we can be a much better place, have a better governance structure, and help restore some trust in government.
Lastly, how's the campaign going? You're running for state treasurer. Looks like you've been successful in the fundraising circuit, no primary opponent. How's things going?
Things are great. I've really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun to get around the state and listen to people. I think that's a very underrated virtue of leadership, is to actually listen. So we're taking that time. We're taking our message across the state, and it's a great state. I mean, you've got wind farms in northwest Missouri. You're growing rice in your neck of the woods in southeast Missouri. It's great. It's a wonderful state. And you know, we have such great people in our state. So to listen to them, to find out how the Treasurer's Office can be more responsive to taxpayers is something that I'm enjoying.
Well, we appreciate you being on. We'll all look forward to following your Twitter feed, especially if there's a Cubs Cards NLDS next month.
That's right. It'll be a lot of fun. I got to tell you, we may take a temporary hiatus of the campaign if the Cards are playing the Cubs because it's going to be intense.
I think the whole state would support that.
Yeah.
Senator, thank you very much for being on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, and we'll leave you with this week's economic indicators.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our Opinion Maker panel with a couple first-time guests. The first being Alderwoman Donna Baringer from here in St. Louis City. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Tracy McCreery, rejoining the show. Thanks again for coming on.
Glad to be here.
Steve Tilley, former House Speaker, governmental consultant. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And so we're very excited to have on a rising star in the Republican Party, Representative Paul Curtman. Representative, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with you. You are a name Missouri Republicans are going to hear more of in the future. Everyone seems to think. Let's talk about a name that burst onto the scene. Eric Greitens jumping into the governor's race. We're here on Sunday morning. He's had a big announcement this weekend. How does he fare entering this pretty crowded field?
I think he fares pretty well. He's certainly demonstrated a command on his ability to generate resources. He has an announcement coming up where he's going to announce that he's running for governor, and I think that his challenge after that point is just going to be to demonstrate his command on the issues when he's talking with the Missouri voters in order to earn their trust.
So right now, where would you peg his chances at?
Oh, it's tough to say. I really don't like drilling down too hard on that until I hear a little bit more of where people stand on the issues and how they fit into the Republican and the conservative ranks, but I guess we have plenty of time to figure that out.
Representative McCreery, this is a person that not long ago was with you campaigning for Democrats.
Exactly.
Does that transition worry you in a general election?
No, I think that every candidate has the right to pick what party and what issues are important to them. My hunch is that, and I'm that way myself. I've been a member of both parties in my adult life, and I think it's okay for people to change. But I agree with Representative Curtman. Eric is really going to have to work hard to prove that he does fit that true conservative mold in order to win the primary. Because as we know, you have to be the most extreme of whatever side to win the primary.
Sometimes, Alderwoman Baringer, what do you think? I mean, it is an interesting dynamic where you could have one former Republican versus one former Democrat switching sides, running for governor.
I think it tells us what the people are thinking, which is they're looking for more moderates. They want people they can relate to. That's how I take it. I respect him for his service because my son is active military as well. But I also know that being in politics, it's a little different type of an animal.
Do you think the Republican primary electorate may be as open to electing a moderate as the Democrat primary electorate would be?
Probably not.
Steve Tilley, you've even ventured into the statewide waters before. What do you think of Greitens? He's come on with a lot of money.
Yeah, I think you've got to give him kudos on his fundraising. I think his resume is probably second to none. I do think the problem for him is being able to explain the switch in parties and potentially the switch in positions. Because I think people respect people that disagree with them. People do not respect people that flip-flop on the issue for political gain. And so I think that's a problem that he's going to have to address. And I think if you handicapped it right now, I think you've got Lieutenant Governor Kinder and John Bruner probably in the lead, and I think Eric Greitens would probably be in third.
There was an interesting poll come out from the liberal Democratic group PPP. There was a few weeks ago, it showed Jason Kander closer than most people would have thought to Senator Blunt. Now it shows Eric Greitens closer to Chris Koster. Do you think there's some smoke signals coming out that there's some national groups that may want that moderate wing? And Representative, how do you think that factors into a Republican race? Can a moderate win this nomination?
I think a moderate could win the nomination. Of course, my hope, and according to my philosophy, I'd really like somebody who's much more liberty-minded and puts people's property rights and freedom and economic freedom, first and foremost. But certainly, there's going to be national groups that have interest in this race. There's 50 governors in our nation. That's a pretty exclusive club. So there will be people from across the state and from across the nation that are weighing in on this particular race.
Let's move now to caucus politics. Representative, you are on the other side of the aisle. It's usually your caucus that has the infighting. What's the old saying? I'm not a member of an organized party. I'm a Democrat. Now it's the Republicans that seem to be having some misfortune of riches. Lieutenant Governor Kinder come out with a column kind of questioning who's a Republican. Several legislators took offense to that. This has to be nice from the other side of the aisle to watch the Republicans have drama for a change.
Well, I actually don't like that kind of drama because I think it got very personal. Representative Sheila Solon, really took Kinder to the mat on what he said. He was trying to paint everybody with a broad brush, and it was inaccurate. I don't like to see infighting because this is all about representatives voting the way their district wants them to vote, and that's not fair to tell people that they're not a true Republican unless they vote 100% of the way that the party tells them to. It's just not right, and I agree with what Donna said earlier. Voters want elected officials who look at issues individually, and they're sick of this partisan, black or white. The voters aren't black or white. Voters like some things that the Republicans stand for and some things that the Democrats stand for. And I think going into the future, we have to be more flexible.
Alderwoman, it seems in the city there's mostly all Democrats elected, right? I mean, so you have, no matter how it comes down, if you have a division that's going to be Democrat versus Democrat, but it is an interesting thing to see this type of infighting in the Republican side, isn't it?
I don't want to say it's interesting, and the only reason I say that is because you don't want infighting, because you want to show the people that as politicians we're above it.
Representative, you're in the caucus. Is this one of these issues that once people go through the holidays and by the time they're back in January, your caucus is back together, and maybe your caucus is together, just not happy with everyone on the outside groups. How does this affect going into January and actually passing laws?
Sure, I think that this issue and the recent drama that we've seen over the right to work issue will probably hang around. There will be an aura of it. But then again, once we go back into Jefferson City, the caucus meets on a regular basis, and normally we're all going to begin to pool around the issues and find the strength and unity that we need to make sure that we push the party forward. So I think that going into next session, I don't anticipate this being a huge issue. I don't anticipate this continuing to be a wedge in our party.
Is it true, though, that if you look at these seats from where some of these folks represent, these are seats not traditionally held by Republicans, and
right.
To have huge majorities to take on education, to override 10 vetoes, you need these folks elected, and it seems like maybe when you get so many members, the way to jump the shark is to start excluding people. I mean, those folks are Republicans, right?
Right. I think we go down a very dangerous road for either party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, when they begin to push people out of the party. And from my experience, just even over the last few presidential elections, sometimes we see people begin to marginalize and push people out of the party, and I think that what we should be doing is trying to reach out and pull in as many people as we possibly can. So I think that most of the people in our party here in our state understand that and recognize it, and while we might have a little bit of drama from time to time on issues, I don't see it being something that hangs around and continues to divide us year after year after year.
You're someone that's tabbed to maybe be in some of these statewide offices and assume some of these leadership positions. Do you learn something by the way some folks in those now have handled this?
Sure. I think that the people that are involved in some of the disagreeable moments, I think that they learn also. And of course, my hope is that people continue to learn from other people's mistakes as well as their own. And I think that we probably have learned a lot from this whole situation on both sides of the issue. And maybe next time around, there's a lot more communication, a lot more effort for people to communicate back and forth as we lead up to a vote or as we lead up to a veto session.
Steve Tilley, you ran this caucus and won more seats up to that time than anybody had ever won for the Republican Party. You couldn't have won those seats with just a cookie-cutter type Republican. Walk us through what goes into winning seats that are tough seats, swing seats, that provide these supermajorities.
Well, I agree with Representative Curtman. I think you want a party. I want my Republican Party to be a party that grows, that has a diversity of views, and doesn't exclude people for one issue or another, because I think that's a sign of a shrinking party. Whenever I was majority leader, we had 89 seats, and I can tell you when you have 89 seats, you're not talking about overriding the governor, okay? And so in 2010, we went out and recruited in districts that we had never won before, ever. And you find community leaders that fit the district. Maybe they're against school choice. Maybe they're against right to work. But they're fiscally conservative, pro-life, pro-gun, small government conservatives. And we were fortunate. We won a lot of races. We went from 89 to 106. And with those individuals, we were able to override the governor on tax cuts. We were able to override the governor on redistricting, which allowed us to have 6 Republican congressmen instead of 5. So I think it's very, very dangerous to exclude people because of one issue. Look, let's go back a little bit. I disagreed with Catherine Hanaway and Peter Kinder when they supported taxpayer funding for a stadium. But I didn't think they were any less of a Republican. We just had a disagreement. Sure. Whenever I was speaker and I tried to get school choice so that kids that were stuck in failing schools had a better opportunity. A lot of Republicans from Southwest Missouri were not for school choice. I didn't think they're any less of a Republican. We just had a philosophical disagreement. And so for people to say because a rep doesn't support right to work, they're somehow less of a Republican, is just absolutely wrong. Or any issue.
Yeah.
Or any issue.
Well, I'm sure you'd love to have some of those people join the Democrat caucus. They could support any number of issues, right, and still be a Democrat, right?
Yeah, I think that it's just really healthy, like Steve said, for there to be openness and a little bit of diversity in both parties, and there should not ever be a litmus test. We should take people at their word and what they identify with.
I mean, going forward, you don't mind if in Jeff County they recruit pro-gun, pro-life Democrats to run for office, right? I mean, if they win the seats, I mean,
yeah, I'd love to win that seat back, and I would be willing to compromise, for that kind of Democrat down in the the outer ring suburbs.
From your view, do you think part of this is that there's very few people around? Like when you saw Tom Dempsey leave the Senate, he's one of the last people that actually knew what the minority was like. He actually served people that was in there. He actually had some idea what it's like to be in the minority. Do you think sometimes you just get fat and happy with too many seats and you forget what it's like if those seats weren't in your column?
Yeah, and fat and happy, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but I do think, because the Republican Party has supermajorities in both chambers, when you have large groups of people like that in any environment, whether it's corporate America or a club, it's hard to manage that many people. And so I think some of this infighting that we're seeing some of it is just natural when you get big groups of people together. You're never going to be able to herd all the cats easily. So, trust me, in our small caucus, we have some of the same challenges.
Sure. Lastly, I want to get to Alderwoman Baringer. Minimum wage debate. We're glad to have both you and the representative here. Walk us through what St. Louis did just quickly and where it stands right now.
Well, I represent the 16th Ward, which is in the city of St. Louis, and it's the western edge, so Shrewsbury is the border I share with. And what happened is at the state level, they decided to make it so municipalities could not change their minimum wage. So at the very last minute, we introduced a minimum wage bill that would have put it up to $15, and then it didn't make it out of committee, and then we brought it out on the floor, and then we had a special session And so what the final bill was that it would go up 40%. 4 times in 2 years. And so that would put it up to, I think, $12 an hour. And what happened is that on the floor, and it was a special session, so there are normally 28 aldermen, and they introduced it. We had amended it. I was one of the 6 who voted no, and I didn't vote no because I'm against raising minimum wage. That's absolutely incorrect. What I am for is making sure that we do it at a state level, because I want to level the playing field. And since I'm right next to St. Louis County, I have small and medium-sized businesses in my ward. And what they were telling me is that if they bring in a dishwasher right now at $9 an hour, because they want to maintain them, they said, what do I do if you raise it to 11? How am I going to pay the people above them that are already at 11 because they've come to that wage because they've earned it? So they said it put them at a big disadvantage. And so I understand that. And what upsets me the most is here we are fighting over minimum wage when I want to start talking about living wages, and I want the state of Missouri to have more living wages.
Representative Curtman, you gave one of the more noted speeches on this issue. Walk us through where you see it from a state perspective.
Sure. Well, from the state perspective, I think that there's a lot to what you just said about making sure that there's some equality under the law across the whole state. I think that for the government to intervene in economic decisions, and economic decisions are not supposed to be made by the government. Economic decisions are supposed to be made by the economy, and the economy is when people, business owners, producers, and consumers compete and cooperate in society to meet their needs. So when the government begins to intervene in economic decisions, often there's repercussions that far exceed our ability for the government to come in and try to control it. For example, talking about dishwashers being paid $9 an hour. If you have 2 dishwashers, but now you have to pay them each $15 an hour, you're probably going to have to fire one because the government leaders don't know the cost of overhead for each and every business. So now the person who's relying on those wages the most just got pushed right out of the labor market because that business owner has to make an economic decision to keep their head above water, and it pushes somebody else into the unemployment line.
Steve Tilley, quickly, let's walk through the politics of this. Mayor Slay picked this issue up, championed it. It looks like it's probably heading to some kind of ballot initiative.
Right.
Won't that be good for Democrats? And if a Democrat statewide gets over the mark by 0.5%, won't they kind of think the mayor made a good call?
I mean, I think it's bad public policy, but good politics for the Democrats. I couldn't agree with Representative Curtman anymore. He's exactly correct on the issue. But clearly, raising the minimum wage, putting it on the ballot will drive turnout in areas probably that are helpful to Democrats on a statewide level and detrimental to Republicans.
Representative, is that part of the calculation here that whatever the courts say, whatever the legislators do, if you put this on the ballot, whether it passes or not, it's definitely got to be good for your party? Well,
actually, I'm going to agree. I'm going to say, look at what happened in the November of 2014 elections. There were several states that statewide passed minimum wage increases, which you could consider a Democratic issue, but yet Republicans clobbered Democrats in the people races. So it's not all gloom and doom for you Republicans on that. I still think there's a way for a state to raise the minimum wage, for a region to raise the minimum wage, but for Republicans to still win. It still comes down to the voters kind of hopping around on the ballot.
And that's where we'll have to leave it this week for This Week in Missouri Politics. We want to leave you this week with a new feature we'll have every week. It's called our Tweet of the Week. This time it's from noted, esteemed journalist, friend of the show, Jason Rosenbaum, who tweeted out, he noticed the governor tweeted he had knee surgery recently. And Rosenbaum, being the very observant journalist he is, pointed out this is going to be devastating for the Jeff City Pickup Basketball League. So we'll leave you this week with our Tweet of the Week, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.